Hi, Dina.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
Good. How are you? It's been so long.
Thank you for joining us tonight. The topic's actually related with her schedule, so that's why I asked Rani to fix the dates for you to make things easier. How's everything going? How's your Thanksgiving? How's the semester?
It was all strange because of COVID, and it's just we're in a very strange time, and starting at a new university in a newer discipline and all these other things, it was a lot.
Yeah, well, same here actually. We don't see any opportunity or any possibilities of having a face-to-face meeting even for next semester, or at least it's gonna be like a hybrid thing. Is it gonna be still an online meeting in your classes for next semester?
Yes, so we're actually given the choice. So because I have a toddler at home, and because of Elisa, I chose to just teach strictly online, and it's actually asynchronous. So I miss my students. Like I don't get to see them all the time, which is disappointing. But
can you?
Sorry, you're breaking up.
Students running. Sorry. So is it okay now? It's Friday evening here, so it's actually.
Yeah, it keeps cutting in and out a little bit. Can you see me and hear me okay?
Yes, you're okay. I guess it's just my from my position. It is not a very pleasant place. But this is Rani. You've never met actually, right? You just been emailing each other. Rani, thank you for everything, for arranging the class.
Nice to meet you, Chris.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well. Thank you for having me.
It's not too early for you.
I have a baby, so yeah, this is fine.
It's 7 a.m. for you.
Yes. Yes, I would typically be waking up right about now with the child, so.
So Rani will assist the whole session for today, right, Rani? And I would kindly ask everyone to remind your friend.
Your voice come and go. Freeze now.
Yeah. Yeah, she's completely frozen for me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, we are waiting the other student.
Okay.
Usually it's my connection that's bad, so I came to campus just to be sure.
I don't know about that. Because it's rainy season here, so it's a really bad connection now.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yes.
So when does your semester end?
It's 2 weeks from now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 2 weeks from now, and we have a Christmas break, and then final exam, and then a semester break.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we finished 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, you have
And then
4 months for Christmas break, right?
so we typically we only have just under a month between semesters, but
Okay.
because of COVID, they ended the semester early and they're starting the next semester late. So
Oh,
I actually have 2 full months off.
oh, that's great.
It's yes, it is.
But you cannot go anywhere to, like
No,
maybe.
I mean, there's plenty of people in the United States that are traveling and doing whatever they want, but we have besides moving, because I graduated and then I moved to the university I'm at now. Besides that move, we really haven't gone anywhere at all since
Yeah.
last March.
Yes, that's last March. Yes, it's the end of February, I bet here. We cannot go anywhere, even go to the mall.
Yeah, I think ours actually, right. I'm trying to remember when my last class was. It may have been the end of February.
Yeah, the end of February.
Dina said that our internet.
Yeah, it's raining bad today. Raining hard.
We our hurricane season wasn't too bad, but we had 2 weeks where our internet was pretty bad. So I teach asynchronous right now, so it's all recorded lectures. So I didn't really have to worry too much about an internet connection, which was nice.
Yeah. So we will have around 100 students.
Okay. And my colleague, Katie Sudnick, who spoke, I guess it was about a month ago now. She said that it was great. She really enjoyed it.
Who is it? Who was it?
Katie Sudnick.
Oh, okay. I don't know because I'm last month I was in my maternity leave, so I don't know what's
okay.
going on.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, my daughter has been a handful. She just turned 13 months.
Oh, really? Oh, very
Yes.
cute. 13 months. They started talking.
Yeah, mostly just babbling. But she's running around. She's climbing on everything. So
You have to pay attention.
yes, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, good evening, student. We have 27 participants now. And it's already 7 p.m. So shall we?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, student, can you turn on your camera? Okay, the others. Hi. Okay, good evening. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. This evening we have guest lecture again for online marketing communication class. His name is Christopher Stuart. He is from University of North Carolina, Wilmington, right, Chris?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Yep.
he's an assistant professor of integrated marketing communication. So the topic tonight is IMC approach to Kickstarter, analyzing the success of analog game Kickstarters. So, Chris, the stage is yours.
All right. And I can share my screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let me. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to talk about this new project that I'm currently working on. So my research before I started this project, a lot of my research was about how we interact with games, both in a pedagogical sense, so in the classroom, as well as a form of entertainment, and what those games do to us, for us, with us. So I started switching over now that I'm an assistant professor of communication. So I started looking into really the marketing and the sales of different types of games. And because I'm so interested in analog games, I started noticing a very interesting trend with Kickstarter, so a large crowdfunding site, and the uptick of sales and marketing for analog games. So that's how this project kind of started. And as you'll see, kind of like the direction that I'm going in with it. Okay, so the agenda for this talk, I'm going to just do a very quick overview of the importance of IMC and how I'm using IMC in this project. Then I'm going to talk about IMC as a form of rhetoric of possibilities. Again, that's going to be kind of a quick overview of how I'm using the rhetoric of possibilities to inform my discussion of IMC. Then I'm going to do a quick overview of Kickstarter and gaming. Even though Kickstarter is a very large crowdfunding project, it doesn't have the same weight in every country and every market. So I do want to talk about Kickstarter a little bit and the gaming part of Kickstarter. Then I'm going to do a case study. I'm going to show you how one company in particular, which started with the gaming boom in 2012, and how they became a multi-million-dollar company and how their communication has drastically shifted on the Kickstarter platform from 2012 to today. And then I'll wrap up talking about Kickstarter design as IMC and where my research is going from there. So first, let's talk about some integrated marketing communication. So the definition that I'm using is from Schultz and Schultz, which is IMC as a process through which companies accelerate returns by aligning communication objectives with corporate goals. So essentially, the way that I'm using it and the way that Schultz and Schultz explain it is that it is a consumer-centric communication, consumer-centric marketing. It's moving away from the business operation of the 4 Ps. So products, prices, places, and promotional. So they describe the 4 Ps as focusing on the product instead of the consumer, setting a price, the price tag of the actual product, organization of distribution channels or the place. So how are they going to get the product to you? And then also the implementation of advertising and promotional programs, very broad, generic type of promotional programs. So IMC takes the 4 Cs or the 4 Ps and moves it to 4 Cs. So Picton and Broderick talk about the 4 Cs in a mixed marketing or a mixed communication way, saying that we need to focus on the customer. So what are the customer wants and needs? How do we direct our marketing, our communication to the consumer and understand what they want and need instead of building a want and need out of thin air? When we talk about cost, it's not just about the price tag, but it's also what is it going to cost for them to purchase this product. So are they going to have to drive somewhere? Are they going to have to use transportation to get there? Can they order it online? How easy is this going to be online? What are the different associated costs that go into how they get that specific product? And then convenience, which has a lot of overlap with cost, is based on the buying habits of this consumer. How convenient is it for them to have this product and buy this product? It's not just about going to get the product and how easy it is to get it, but also once they have it, how convenient is it for them to use it or purchase another one? And then of course, communication. Communication is very important to IMC because it is a two-way communication. It must be a way for the consumer to also contact the manufacturer or the producer of this product. So Schultz and Schultz talk about direct marketing. So they say, with its focus on identification, contact, and measurement of returns, form specific customers over time, was one of the key drivers in the development of IMC. So one of the big things that they would focus on in all of their work is one, consumer specific, customer specific, but also it is over time. It's not the immediate acquisition of money. It's not get rich quick schemes. It's about building a brand and loyalty. So they talk about this value add model, or the 5 R's, and I'm sorry for the warped picture here from the book. But they say that, we can move away from, we kind of move away from the supply chain mentality, and it's more of the demand chain. Even though demand is a very loaded, heavy word, what they're saying here is, instead of, they create a hierarchy and a flow of goods from raw material to all the way to the sale point. It's more of, we have to know what the customer wants, and then we figure out how to get it to them. So it's a reverse model. So the 5 R's that they talk about here are relevance, receptivity, response recognition, and relationship. And what they mean by all this is really that relevance. So how relevant is our communication? How relevant is our marketing? The marketer must further provide relevant, compelling, and meaningful communication, as well as relevant competitive pricing and relevant distribution systems. So it has to be relevant to that consumer in all aspects. Receptivity. We need to be able to reach the customer and the prospect customers when they will be most receptive to this message. The example that they give is, McDonald's. How do we get to that consumer or the prospect consumer when they are hungry? So we have to understand their buying habits. We have to understand the different aspects of the consumer to be able to target different areas of their lifestyle to make sure that our communication gets to them. But in addition to that, it's also, how open is the organization to new ideas? So we, as an organization that is communicating, they have to be flexible. And receptivity is not just about the consumer being receptive. It's also about the organization that is communicating also being receptive. Again, that two-way communication. And then response. How easy is it for the customer or prospect customer to respond to the company's offerings? This is one of the big problems that we have with a lot of the really large, especially online retailers, is that they are not responsive. It's very difficult to contact them. You have to go through a lot of different steps to talk to a specific person, a real person, instead of it being a bot. So that response, being able to actually speak to a representative, is a big part of response here. But also, how well can the organization sense, adapt to, and answer the needs and wishes of the customer? So again, it kind of talks about receptivity here, but it's about that flexibility. How can you respond? How can you see what the customer needs and respond in a meaningful way. Then we have recognition. So the communicator's ability to recognize a customer at important points of contact and immediate connect to the firm's or the communicator's stored knowledge about the customer. So being able to recognize a customer and being able to see their patterns and figure out exactly what they need, when they need it, and how to get it to them. So there's a lot of overlap with these R's. But in addition to that, it's also the customer's ability to recognize and select the organization's brand from a given array of alternatives. So this would be brand recognition, brand loyalty. You don't want to be generic. If one example that they give is if you had a bunch of logos on a wall, somebody would be able to point it out and say, I know that brand, they do X, Y, and Z, their values are X, Y, and Z, I buy from them because X, Y, and Z. And finally, relationship. And relationship in this diagram, so the customer is at the center, and then the company or the firm is around the customer, and then we have these points, these value add model points, and then relationship just kind of ties it all together, wraps around it. So the customer is the one who creates the relationship. It is not the consumer, of course, or it's not the organization. Of course, the organization has to create itself and it has to have the ability to reach the consumer. However, it is the consumer that it approaches the organization. So it's a very important flip in the business model because it puts the power on the consumer, not the other way around. The large supply chain organizations like Amazon, for instance, they don't need to reach the customer in the traditional way, but they also don't need to build a relationship with the customer. They're kind of like in this weird liminal space where they are so big and so persistent with their marketing and everything else that they know that whether they go to you or you go to them, they're still going to get a sale. So their marketing is much more of just brand recognition instead of the substance that IMC typically deals with here. So taking those understandings of IMC, which is all about the customer, right? Consumer-based. I want to switch it over to the rhetorics of possibility. So the way that I use the rhetorics of possibility, I mostly used Jonathan Polakis, and he uses sophistic rhetoric to talk about the rhetorics of possibility. Now, a lot of what he is talking about is Gorgias and how sophists use language, use words as a playful way of communicating. They are able to step into a certain situation, create an opportunity to play with the words and create multiple avenues of possibility. So when he talked about looking at a situation, you have to observe the opportunity to insert yourself. You have to be able to be playful with your language. And then you have to create multiple possibilities to break the binaries, the yes, no of a debate or a decision. So he talks about singularities and binaries being easily bent and broken. There is no need, there is a need for flexibility or the possible when it comes to communication. So he breaks it down. He talks about a lot of different aspects of opportunity. But what I would like to focus on here is his movement from actuality to possibility. So when he talks about actuality, he says that actuality is what is believed to be known and understood about reality. It is the articulation of here and now. The problem with actuality is that it confines people to boundaries because it says, I am here, I am not there. So it puts them in a very specific spot, and he describes it as being almost suffocating because you can't traverse that boundary. Ideality is quite the opposite. Ideality refers to the way things ought to be, the form of perfection. The problem with ideality is it is always what is envisioned and known about the world that can never be made actual. You can never have ideality. Things can never be perfect. We live in a far too complicated world for perfection to exist. So when he talks about perfection, it is actually the nowhere, never, and should be. So we always have this idea, well, it should be this way, but we know it'll never be that way. So how do you deal with actuality and ideality? Well, you insert possibility, which actually wraps around both of these. It traverses both of these. It gets between both of these. Possibility is kind of everywhere in this understanding. Possibility refers to the things that are not, but can be. What lies at a distance from their immediate grasp. So when he talks about possibility, he says that because it's just outside the immediate grasp, it's the there, the then, and the can be. It's a fluidity, it's an elusiveness, and it's a malleability of the human experience. So the fact that it is malleable means that we are able to take where people currently are, the actuality, their understanding of where they would like to be, ideality, the perfect form, and then we are able to kind of meet them in the middle with communication. So IMC needs to be consumer-centered, it needs to be flexible, it needs to be relevant, it needs to be responsive, and all these other things. The real of the possibility is where IMC really is. The actual is far too rigid, and it confines the consumer. So they get put essentially in a box, and they feel that they cannot do certain things because they're put in that very specific box. Whereas the ideal will always be upsetting because we can never have it. It's we can't have any perfect form of anything. So if the company does not evolve, if the communication does not evolve to work with the needs of the consumer, it then puts the consumer in a very precarious box, and it does not treat them as fluid beings, which can be extremely off-putting to the consumer. The possible is where communication should sit. It encompasses and dips into both realms of the actual and the ideal. Now, these concepts are far, far, far more complicated as I am presenting them here. This is essentially 3 pages worth of what he talks about over the course of 200 or so pages. But this basic concept is what I use in a lot of my research. So how does all this relate to Kickstarter? So first, let's do an overview of Kickstarter. If I was standing in front of all of you in a lecture hall, I would ask how many of you have heard of Kickstarter, how many of you have bought Kickstarter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. For those of you that don't know, Kickstarter is a crowd-funded, some would even say a crowd marketing organization. The way that they describe themselves on their website, they say Kickstarter campaigns make ideas into reality. So they essentially take this idea of ideality and they put it into actual practice. It's where creators share new visions for creative work with the communities that will come together to fund them. Now, Kickstarter, if you go to their About section, they have testimonials, they have all different kinds of things from creators that have used Kickstarter, both the rich and famous, as well as a very standard, very, very basic use of the platform. There are campaigns that are only $10, and then there's other campaigns that are in the millions. So they try to reach everybody. So their mission statement, this is a very abbreviated form of their mission statement, but they say, we don't want the art world elites and entertainment executives to define our culture. We want creative people, even those who have never made anything before, to take the wheel. We help creators connect directly with their communities, putting power where it belongs. A lot of their mission statement is about putting power into the hands of the creator, instead of having to go to these really large organizations where they have to sell off their ideas, which turn into something radically different than what they anticipated. This allows the creative power, the marketing power, the production power to still reside in the hands of the creator. Now they have a community statement. Now this is because the Kickstarter would not exist without its community, right? Its backers, the crowdfunding aspect. They do have a community statement, which many organizations do not have. And what I want to focus here on part of their community statement is that what they say is most successful projects build a snowball effect, winning over friends and early supporters who then share the idea with their networks and signal their support to a wider Kickstarter community, over 19 million people. Now, this is kind of idealistic, because if you just share a project with some friends and you maybe get a couple others, that does not mean that 19 million people are then going to support your project on Kickstarter. Kickstarter has evolved quite a bit, but they still have competitors. They have other crowdfunding sites. They have other organizations that they are competing against. And because of that, communication has become so important, especially for the smaller projects, especially for the projects that do not fulfill a most maybe physical needs. There's a lot of very physical, practical things that go onto Kickstarter, a lot of hardware that goes onto Kickstarter, but the entertainment side of it, it's even more competitive because it's not a store. You're investing in a project. This is one of the things that a lot of new backers don't fully understand. They'll see a game, a movie, a music album or something like that they're very interested in, but they don't understand that it could take almost 2 years to even see that finished product because it's an investment into the production and the creation of that artifact. And a lot of people don't understand that. We live in an instant gratification culture, and we want the thing immediately. And Kickstarter has done everything that it can to ensure that people understand that this is not a store. And if you actually set up something on Kickstarter as a store, it will be taken down by Kickstarter. This is only for things that are in progress, early stage to a mid stage, but not the production level. So we can talk about Kickstarter all day, about all different philosophies and everything else, but numbers are always interesting to talk about when it comes to these kind of projects. Now, this is all in US dollars, and these are their numbers as of yesterday, as of December 10th. Because they update everything every single day, it's very important to talk about this as a specific point in time, which is yesterday. So total pledged dollars, this does not mean successful dollars, but total pledged dollars is $5.4 billion. For a crowdfunding site, that is pretty remarkable, but still a big number like that doesn't really mean too much. And that's why I'm going to focus on a very specific category of games. But successfully funded projects since 2009, 193,000. Total backers, just under 19 million. Repeat backers, 6 million, which is a pretty substantial repeating backer. They pride themselves that the average backer will likely back at least 3 to 6 projects. And if you are targeting a very specific audience through social media in particular, you can increase the repeatability. Total pledges is there as well. But The numbers that I think are most interesting is when you start looking at the individual categories. So there are 13 categories, and then there's 20-something subcategories. Within the 13 categories, the one that I'm going to be focusing on is games. Now, games can mean many different things, as I learned while I started this research. In my mind, games typically mean something that you can play. It would be gaming hardware, or it would be a analog or digital game. So I wanted to look at how that category stacks up against the other categories. So overall, $4.95 billion in successful pledges, 193,000 projects funded with an average success rate of roughly 38%. So 38% of the projects that go on there are successfully funded. In the games category, $1.36 billion in successfully pledged money. That is the highest category out of all the categories. 56,643 projects were launched so far, which is the third highest out of all the categories. It is behind film and video, has the highest amount of projects, then it's music, and then it's gaming. It has a relatively high success rate, but it's kind of in the middle there. 42.22% success rate against the overall 38% success rate. It has the highest amount of projects that have hit over $1 million US. So it has 192 games that have hit that threshold. Sorry, just looking at my notes real quick, which actually accounts for a pretty large amount when you start digging into their statistics there. Then it has 23,798 successful funded projects. Again, that's third. This time it's slightly different. Music has the highest successfully funded projects, then film and video, and then gaming. The ones that almost made it, but not quite, there's 792 games that were either 81% to 99% funded. And then out of the all-time projects, the most money that was funding projects, 20 out of the top 50 projects are games. 15 out of the top 50 are tabletop games, so analog games. So this is anywhere from something like a card game to Monopoly, or something far more complicated, like Gloomhaven or Frosthaven, which are these really, really large games. So this is also slightly changing. I first collected data back in September, and it was a little bit different. I think there were fewer games in the all-time top projects. So games are getting a lot of traction here. There's an article that I pulled up that says towards the end of 2019, so at the end of last year, they were estimating that 7 games were being funded every single day on Kickstarter. So seven different games, video and analog games. All right, so I know this graphic is pretty ugly. There's a lot of data here that I wanted to throw on. And I want to walk you through it real quick, just so you know what you're looking at. So the rank on the left-hand side is total dollars that went in. So these are the top projects on Kickstarter. These are only ones that are depicted as games. So the master category of gaming. Now, there's a couple exceptions here. One, the number 7 Critical Role animated special. Shout out to anybody that watches Critical Role. They decided that they wanted to take their Dungeons and Dragons Twitch stream and animate it as a animated series. So it's actually under the film and video category, but it followed a lot of the same marketing techniques as gaming. And because they are a gaming group, I wanted to represent them here. Ouya is actually now a dead project. But it was a very high selling in 2012, very, very high selling, highly marketed Android-based gaming console. So it's hardware, but that one does fall under gaming. The ones that are in green are video games. Everything else are analog. So typically we think of video games getting the most money, having the largest market, and analog games not. But it's actually not necessarily true, especially when it comes to crowdfunding and Kickstarter. A lot of the top-rated video games on Kickstarter, you can buy in a store, or you can buy on a digital market for the Xbox, PlayStation, PC, etc. The analog games, though, some of them you can't find in a store. Either you get them on Kickstarter, or you have to purchase them directly from an online site, but a lot of these do not make it to physical retail. So a couple things I want to point out here. So there are some repeat companies on this list. There's 3 companies in particular that have had multiple productions in the top 50 or so. Also, the backer count. If you people find this statistic very interesting, because the more backers you have should mean the more money, but that is not necessarily the case, because it depends on how much your product costs. For instance, number 53 from Dwarven Forge, it's literally scenery, printed scenery that you can use for a game. It only had 3,500 backers, but it still raised over $4 million US. Another thing I want to point out here are the total funds. So you'll see at the top here, the top game was actually pretty recent. It was this year, 2020, and it raised almost $13 million. And its goal was only $500,000. So you have to set a goal on Kickstarter, and you have to meet that goal in order for the project to go through. And a lot of these are set anywhere between 100 and 500,000. There are some that are set higher. For instance, number 10, the one that's kind of brownish, that's actually a gaming table, a table that you can play analog games on. And they set it to $1 million, and they raised 8.8 million. Again, that one was also in 2020. So by looking at this list, you can see that analog games are really popular. Very popular. And with the pandemic, they've actually seen a huge increase in sales. Some are attributing this to people wanting to get away from screens. Staring at a screen, especially as a student, as a professor, anybody in academia, you stare at a screen almost all day. And then in addition to that, we have our televisions, we have our phones, we have a lot of screens. We're in a screen culture. So there's a really big movement towards games and analog games. So that's part of the reason. Another thing I want to point out here is and I'm going to focus on this a little bit more later, but is the 2 numbers on the right-hand side. So the column that has U is how many updates they've given to their community. And then the before is how many updates do they have before the product was fully funded. Now, almost all these projects, they have a 30-day window for funding. So you can see that it's not that consistent, but there's some that have a lot of updates. For instance, the Batman tabletop game, they sent out 74 updates before it was fully funded. And most of these numbers, even the ones that are somewhat older, they are still sending out updates to their community. All right, so now I'm gonna switch gears, and I'm actually gonna show you the case study that I have here. Okay, so there's a couple things that I want to call attention to when focusing on this very specific company. So this is a game called Zombicide. I know it's not the most appropriate topic to talk about with a pandemic, talking about zombies and undead, but this company is primarily a Kickstarter company. And they started, their first game was Zombicide, and I'm going to show the evolution of this. So a couple things to mention about CMON Gaming. Now, you won't see CMON Gaming on this actual box that we have in front of us here. It says Guillotine Games. Guillotine Games was bought by CMON Gaming. CMON Gaming was also called Cool Minis or Not before they switched their name to CMON. It's had a lot of growth and a lot of evolution over the years. But CMON Gaming has 40 successful projects on Kickstarter. 40 is a lot for a gaming company. They typically put out about 4 games a year, roughly. Sometimes they have more. And their first game went up in early 2012. Their first was this one, 2012. Their most recent one closed in August of 2020. So they're a very current company. This game got them on the map. It is not their most successful. It's actually one of the lower successful games. However, when you put it in perspective of the whole company, this is what really earned them the notoriety, the brand loyalty, the brand identity that they currently have. So out of their 40 games, they've published 40 games out of 23,798 games that are on Kickstarter, which is only 0.12% of the market. However, they have earned over $66 million out of the $1.36 billion. That's about 5% of the total revenue of that category. So they're a very successful company. Half of their games, 20 of them, have reached over $1 million. That is 10% of the games that have reached $1 million. So not the biggest market share, but they've taken in significant money from Kickstarter. This original game, I don't know how well you can see it, but you can see updates towards the lower part of the screen. There are 76 updates. Technically, there were only 75. The 76th update was reminding them of a new project. The newest Zombicide, which closed in August, August of this year, has 102 updates, and they're still updating the community. So they're pretty consistent when it comes to this communication here. So there's a couple things that I want to show. So if you've never seen a Kickstarter site before, it's segmented in a couple different ways. So the campaign itself is this really, really, really long scroll. If they don't, you can see on the left-hand side, it says story and then risks. If they don't set up a different hierarchy to click through their project, you have to scroll through the entire thing, which is a lot. We also have FAQs, which most companies, they only have 3 FAQs, and it's about when will I get my product, when does shipping start, and the risk of this not being funded. Then we have our updates, our comments, and then community, which community is used in many different ways. But comments, updates, and campaign are the most common aspects of a Kickstarter page. On the right-hand side, we have our support sections. These are buttons that you could click on, and it'll indicate how much money you want to fund. So you'll notice that on this one in particular, there's 10, 25, 35, 75, 100 or more, 190 or more, and then 280 or more, and it just keeps going. So one thing that Kickstarter asks is to have multiple increments with actual rewards. So typically you would find a $1 pledge that is just, you want updates on the project, and this is all you can offer, and that's fine. And then they offer having increments of 5 or 10 or 15, depending on how expensive your product is. But they say that you should always have a $25 option, because $25 is the most common fund for Kickstarter. So one thing you'll notice here is it's a lot of text. Also, as you start going through, there's really no hierarchy. So this is the reward section. It is the same size as the other banners that they have. It's very difficult to see where the different aspects of the game are being articulated. Right now, these are just talking about the pledge numbers. So if you pledge $100, if you pledge $190, if you pledge $550, this is what you get. And it's kind of hard to understand. They have the stretch goals. Stretch goals means that once it is funded, if it goes past a certain amount, we're going to add more things to the project. Most of them are exclusives to people that fund it. So if you bought this retail in the store, you wouldn't get the stretch goals. So a lot of artwork, when it comes down to risk, there's almost nothing here. And it's not a very appealing site. Well, it did get funded. And we can see the number here, 781,000. Their goal was 20,000. They were really hoping for 20 as a new company, and they got 781,000 from 5,000 backers. Not bad. Season 2, so they put this one out as an expansion. You can see here there's two expansions. We have a nice video at the top. It looks better produced. This one raised 2.2 million with almost 9,000 backers. Instead of 20,000, they were asking for 25. And you'll notice that it's starting to look a little bit cleaner. There's more videos, less text. We see exactly what we're buying here. We see some nice artwork instead of the black and white artwork that they had. We can actually see the game, whereas we couldn't see that in the previous post. We see quantities. And we're not seeing a lot of numbers in the beginning. And then it goes into the pledge levels. And there's these nice graphics that we can see that we know exactly what we're getting. On the right-hand side, we see the pledges. They start at 50 this time. So instead of getting just one figure, which a lot of people were upset about, you start with a copy of one of the games, and then you move on from there. Season 3, 2 more expansions. This one, because the game now started winning awards, it had a lot of support online. So this one raised almost the same amount, 2.8 million, but this time it was 12,000 backers. So we can see that there's a progression here. This one starts at $100 instead of 50. And as we go through, we can see that there's a much clearer message here. What is the game? We have a bit of a story here. Then we get this nice graphic. What's included? What do you get for your money? Very clean, very professional, very organized. We see each piece individually. These are all things that the community wanted. They have this optional stuff. A lot of programs will do this, and they say you want fries with that as their little catch tagline. And these are all the previous products that they've put out, and you can add them to your pledge. So this would just get them more and more money, more about the game, how it actually plays, the actual components, very professional looking. And then we get into the stretch goals at the bottom. So if there's 100, if we reach 150, if we reach 175, they started adding a lot. And if I scroll towards the bottom here, the last one is if you get to 2.8 million, you would get Raj from Big Bang Theory was in this game. And you can see that this is far more articulated than the previous ones. Still not a lot with risk and challenges, but it's definitely more detailed. But now that they have had a lot of success, they pretty much say, look, we know what we're doing, trust us. Whereas before it was, just kind of throwing your hands in the air and hoping for the best. So then there was a break, and then a new version came out. So all those take place in a modern setting. The fans were really asking for something that was based in medieval times, medieval Europe. So they decided to listen to their fans through the comments, through the updates and everything else. And then they created Black Plague. Again, not 100% appropriate to talk about during a pandemic, but very popular game. You can see that it has 80,000 comments from the community. So a lot of people are talking about these products. And now you can see that they've built on the communication style that they had before. So again, we see all the different components. This red tag is something that Kickstarter provides, Kickstarter exclusives. So as stretch goals get unlocked, or if you want to add extra value to your supporters, you can say, look, these are the exclusives that you will get if you are an initial backer. Now, with a game like this that has a lot of miniatures that you can paint and use, it's easy to offer extra minis. However, if this was a tabletop role-playing game, if it's just a book that you're getting, maybe you'll get added supplements, maybe you'll get digital exclusives. So there's other ways of doing this, and other companies do it too. This is not just unique to CMON Gaming. But you can tell now they've listened to their fans in so many different ways that they're clearly articulating everything that you will get and what you can purchase extra. And then we start getting these really nice graphics of what the game looks like. Fast forward to their expansion that they did. Looks almost identical. It was a year later. Looks very similar. Then they changed the aesthetic completely, and they wanted to bring zombies to space because that's the natural progression with zombies, I guess. This one started earning even more money, 18,000 backers. They, again, listened to the community. They started changing up the rules and everything else. There's more of a story here articulating what they do. And finally, to bring it full circle, they decided to re-release their original. What made them so successful, they wanted to re-release the original Zombicide with updated graphics, updated artwork and mechanics and all these other things. It wasn't as successful as they wanted it to be. They wanted to hit somewhere around 5 million, but still they hit 3.4 million and they had 21,000 backers. And you can tell, you know, if I go back to the original, right? This is the original. What's the story? Well, there is no story. It's just a list of what you get. And if we go to the newest, you know, what's the story here? Well, you actually get a story. You get progression. What do you get in here? Well, this is all the stuff that you're going to get. Instead of a list, here's a picture. Their communication has radically changed. And their updates, I'll just click on the update page real quick. The updates here, there's 102, and the last update was December 4th, so more updates will come. But they, every step of the way, every single step, they send out an update. And the more updates that are sent out, especially with the gaming community, the higher chance that they're going to either back the project, spread the news of the project, or they will become more of a loyal customer. Now, why? Why does all this how does all this tie into IMC? So Kickstarter actually has something called the Creator Handbook. It is not really a handbook. If you were to print it, maybe it would be 3 pages long. There's not a lot of detail here at all, unfortunately. They definitely need to spruce it up a bit. But they have this really interesting section called Telling Your Story. Now, remember, IMC is all about the brand history. It's about connecting with your audience, building that loyalty, right? And that's kind of what they're talking about here. They don't, obviously they don't say IMC, but they say, you know, tell your story. Who are you? Introduce your team, yourself, your work, your examples. Now, some of the smaller companies, not CMON Gaming, but some of the other smaller companies, you'll get headshots of each person working on it, talking about what they've done in the past. Maybe they'll talk about their dog. Maybe they'll talk about their favorite sports team. It's very personal. What are you planning to make? More detail, the better. Yes, details are very important for the Kickstarter site. Where did the project come from? People like to hear inspiration. They want to know where their favorite games came from. Were they born out of, you know, thin air, or was there something more specific? What's your plan? What's your schedule? Have a clear outline. Not every company does that well. What's your budget? Simple breakdown of your budget. And why do you care? Why are you so passionate about this? And then when they talk about rewards, what do you offer? Know your community, so know your audience, right? The demographic information. Offer things in different formats. Be fair. That's something that they repeat multiple times. Please be fair. The most popular pledge is $25. Don't price gouge. Don't charge a lot of money. And then offer a range of rewards. So remember, IMC moved from the 4 Ps to the 4 Cs. So customer, this is just a copy and paste from a previous slide. Customer, what are the customer wants and needs? Well, CMON Gaming looked at the customer wants and needs. And they did everything that they could to evolve their product over time, both how they represented the product, but then also the product itself. Cost, what are the additional prices? Well, comes down to the budgeting information. So one is size. A lot of them will talk about how big these games actually are. These games are massive. If I wasn't in my office, I can show you one of them. They are very large. It's not like a Monopoly box. They are substantial. The big fans of Simon Gaming, they brag about how heavy everything is. So they'll talk about how much weight of the game that they have instead of how many versions they have, because they are so massive. Convenience, the purchase base or on buying habits, they understand. They understand really well how their consumers are buying these products, and they evolve with that. And then communication is two-way. This is not only the updates, but this is also the comment section. You can actually, throughout the entire process, and this is where the Rhetorics of Possibility come in, the entire process, they listen to the fans. Hey, instead of having this color scheme, why don't you try that color scheme? Instead of having another male figure in the game, why don't we have a transgender figure? Why don't we have a female figure? Instead of having a modern Washington, D.C., why don't we have a European setting? These are all things that fans were thinking that were more idyllic, right? It's in the ideal, it's perfect, they'll never get it. But it's not. With Kickstarter, things become possible because you have that open communication with the actual creators. And finally, I want to talk very briefly about keeping the backers informed. I want to focus again on those last two columns, the total number of communications versus and how many times they communicated through updates with their backers before the project was actually funded. So you can see that back in 2012, people were just trying to figure things out. Exploding Kittens, one of the most popular games on, the most popular game on Kickstarter. It had 219 backers. That is the most backers for any project on Kickstarter by almost 80,000, or I'm sorry, 120,000, I believe. So it had a lot of backers, $8 million, but they only sent out 15 updates to their community before it was funded. Whereas a game like Dark Souls had 63 updates, Batman had 74, Bloodborne had 57. So it doesn't necessarily mean the more updates, the more funding you'll get, but the community definitely appreciates it. And if you plan on putting out multiple games, they definitely keep up with the company because they feel like they're actually part of the process. And these are some of the references I had if anybody is interested in them. But I'm still in the beginning process of all of this. And I am very open to whatever questions you have and bringing this back to IMC, Rhetoric of Possibilities, or anything like that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I have to apologize. I cannot turn my camera on.
No worries.
Guys, do you have any question? We have how many groups? We have 16 groups in online marketing communication class. So maybe each group has one questions.
And I know the internet is spotty for a lot of people, so if you want to type them, that's fine as well.
Yeah, you can write it down in chat room.
Yes, maybe I want to start first with the question.
Okay.
So first of all, thank you for your presentation. It was such a good experience to hear about that. And also I want to apologize because my question is gonna be like technical kind of thing, because our group didn't really understand like the whole concept of the Kickstarter. We understand that people can give money to the company and they will give I mean, like for the like gaming company, and they will get like this and that, but we didn't really understand what will Kickstarter get from those companies.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just like any business, they get a cut. They get a percentage. I believe they changed their services um, a while back. So so this might not be 100% accurate, but based on how much money is earned, they get a percentage. And I think it's somewhere around like 10%, 5 to 10%. So Kickstarter is the platform. They also offer the community, that right on their webpage, they say like, why use Kickstarter instead of all these other sites? Well, because Kickstarter has 19 million backers. So it's a community. They have an email blast. They have Kickstarter forums and groups and everything else. So what Kickstarter is doing, and if you read their history, it started, I think it was 3 or 4 people in New York City that created Kickstarter back in 2009. And now they have a couple hundred employees that work for them. But essentially what they're doing is, one, they're making sure that these are not scams. So they review every single project before it goes live. And sometimes some will go live, but then they catch them afterwards. And on the Wikipedia page, there's actually a list of controversial projects that went on Kickstarter that were either taken off or not. So one, there's less of a chance of getting scammed by using Kickstarter. So Kickstarter, that's part of the cost that you pay. Plus it's the community, but they do get 5 to 10% of whatever you earn. And if you factor in some of these projects that make, $12 million, Kickstarter is getting a very large percentage of that. So yeah, so that's what Kickstarter gets out of it. They get a percentage, a kickback from those. I think you could also, Kickstarter now offers a marketing service, or at least I think they have a marketing firm that works with them on social media. So you could actually pay Kickstarter or pay this firm for better marketing.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Hey, I'm Nisha from Group 14. I actually have another question. Following to find your question, because I'm kind of confused. I'm still kind of confused.
Okay.
So if we're talking about like the game context, because you earlier say game in Kickstarter, what's the difference between Kickstarter and Steam? Since in Kickstarter they also like sell game. I'm kind of confused about that. Like, why? Thank you.
I'm sorry, you were breaking up a little bit. So you said, what's the difference between Kickstarter and Steam?
Like kind of like website that sells game, like for example like Steam, because
right.
On Kickstarter also like sells game too, right? That's my question. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. So first and foremost, Kickstarter is not a store, and they make that very specific. You do not purchase products from Kickstarter. You are pledging, you are investing in a company to create that product. And then there's another service that actually collects your money. So there's a backer kit is the most popular one. It's you leave the Kickstarter site and then you get a login for backer kit. And that's when you actually put in your money, your financial information and what you actually want to get based on what that company is now producing. And the production changes throughout the entire process, because it is a process. So you are not purchasing anything. You are investing in the process. So for instance, there's a game that I backed where I invested $5. That was not enough to get me the final product. However, that gave me the opportunity to get the game earlier than everybody else. That also gave me a say in the production process. So they sent out surveys about different things. There was testing that I could participate in, and there were a lot of different things around that. So I still had if I wanted to, I still had a creative say in the design process, right? So at the end of it, you're not always getting exactly what you see on Kickstarter. It depends on the process. Steam or GOG or Ubisoft or like all these other services that you can actually purchase from. I'll even throw Amazon in there, Xbox, PlayStation, etc. It is a final product that you can pre-order, say, I want that product, but you have no say in the process whatsoever, right? I want that final product, and I am giving you $60 or whatever it is to get that product. And there's no exclusives or anything like that. It's everybody has a fair share. Whereas if it's Kickstarter, you are part of that process. It's all about the community and process. Steam does have early access, right? So Steam allows people to put the alpha or beta versions up there asking for money to help develop the process or to the finished product. So in that way, in that small way, it is kind of like Kickstarter. However, in order to put something on Steam, it needs to be functioning and working. Kickstarter, you just need to have a prototype or even an idea, depending on what category it's in. So the top selling products, believe it or not, on Kickstarter, the top funded projects are smartwatches. Well, you're not going to have a fully created smartwatch and ask people for money. They have a design concept, they take the money, and then they bring it to an engineer to create it. So it's their ideology is very different because it is not a store. And if you try to put something up as a store, as a finished product, Kickstarter will take it down, and they could even fine you. So that's the fundamental difference between the two. Yeah. Good question though. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So basically we're like funding the creator or the company to help them, but we get something like only for bonus, right?
Yeah,
so so on Kickstarter, I'll just give one example.
Your voice come and go. It's not clear enough question.
Mine, Rani?
Anisha, can you repeat your question?
Oh, I heard her question.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's like there was a game that I recently funded recently. It was about 2 years ago. Still didn't get it yet, but that's how Kickstarter works, right? It could be anywhere from several months to several years before you get it. If you funded them with a certain amount of money, not only can you play test and help them, your name is also in the book. So like you're part of that production. It says that you're a backer and an investor. I also got exclusive content that'll never be in a store. So they only make so many of them for the backers. So they don't make any extras. It's exclusively for you. And then you can create artwork that'll be in the book. They'll create a character around you. There's all these different things that you can get. It's more than just getting it first. It's being part of the production of it. So and different companies do it in very different ways. Like some of them, you might just get an exclusive color. Like the game that you get is purple, but everybody else that didn't back it is orange. I mean, some companies do that. That's not a huge benefit, but it's having a say in that final product that is so important to Kickstarter. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, you're very welcome.
Yeah. Excuse me, Mr. I am Rifki from Group 12. I want to ask a question about Kickstarter games. There is one Kickstarter game that I was interested about, which is Mighty Number 9.
Okay.
So the Mighty Number 9 was created by the Mega Man creators. The Capcom fans as well as Mega Man fans give the creator a lot of Kickstarter monies. Oh, the game was delayed several times. Apparently, the reason is because the creator want to make ports for different consoles. The game originally created for PC. However, they decided to make a version for PS4, Xbox, Nintendo 3DS, etc. So upon release, the game received bad reviews because of its poor performance. So what I'm gonna say is, well, how do we avoid such miscalculations during our Kickstarter project?
That's a good question. So for those of you not familiar, so I'm gonna actually share my screen so everybody's on the same page here. So this is Mighty Number 9. So Mighty Number 9 is actually one of the top video games funded on Kickstarter. You can see here that it has almost 400,000 comments, 123 updates, 17 FAQs. This game, it's more successful now than it was at first launch, but you're talking about risks. So if I go down to the risks and challenges, this is more comprehensive than most games and most projects that you'll find on Kickstarter. But here's the interesting thing. Because it is a process, right? Communication is so important because you need to mitigate the negative reviews that could potentially come out with delays. Delays are very popular in games now, but you need to mitigate those problems. So if you have a community, I forget exactly how many. So if you have 67,000 backers on here, that is 67,000 people that you need to communicate with every step of the way so they don't feel lost and frustrated about delays, about miscommunications, about maybe the game heading in the wrong direction or whatever. Mighty 9 did do that to an extent, but if you see down here in the risks and challenges, the two most common known unknowns, right, are delays and unexpected costs. So you may be giving them money, $20 for a copy of the game, but then the game ends up being way more than $20. So they might not have all the features in it that you wanted from the start because of the cost inflations. And then delays, well, translation takes a long time. Going through the bugs takes a long time. Negotiating contracts across different systems takes a very long time. So this game was expected to release in December 2013. I forget when it actually came out, but it was significantly later, if I remember. And they say multiple times in the risks that there will be delays, that they want to involve the community and they want to be able to have honest conversations. However, between the Western world and Eastern world in this game industry, there's going to be issues. And they explain all of this. As far as Kickstarter is concerned, as an organization, they did everything that they were supposed to do. But just because the organization says that does not mean that the community is happy with it. So yes, this got really bad reviews after it came out. But from what I remember with with the Kickstarter community, Kickstarter was actually said that this was a model project because they have 123 updates. Now, some of these updates we can't see because they're only for backers, but a lot of them are, hey, sorry that we haven't contacted you in 6 months. That's highly problematic. And I've been part of Kickstarter projects where you don't hear anything for months and months. And all you think is, well, somebody stole my money. Like, I'm not getting that money back. Either because one, they think that it's a store and that they should get something very quick, or that, well, we just haven't heard anything in a very long time. So these updates go all the way to 2017. And their projected date, it was funded in 2012, and they wanted it out at the end of 2013, and they did not hit that goal. But if you go through, so 2016, we'll just click into this one. So we have bad news regarding Mighty Number 9. This is in 2016, 3 years after it was supposed to be released. There are known issues with the Xbox 360 version of the game, so on and so forth. So what you do to mitigate this stuff is you have a comprehensive risk section like they had, but then you have to send out monthly updates. And there's a lot of video games that have learned from the mistakes of games like this, very high profile games. One of the Pillars of Eternity is another very, very big game that came out through here. Pillars of Eternity essentially came out around the same time as this, and they updated the community almost weekly. Not on Kickstarter, they had their own Discord, I believe, but they put in weekly updates to make sure that everybody understood they were working on the game, what problems they were having, and then they started asking the community for input. And once you start asking the community for help, they're much more okay with delays because they feel like they are helping change the game. So it's all about making sure that the consumer is the central power. And if you don't treat the consumer as the central power of the communication and of the process for your product, and people will feel that they're being taken advantage of. So I think Mighty Number 9 is a great example of Kickstarter, something in Kickstarter that could have been better. But as far as Kickstarter was concerned, they warned the community every way that they could that this could happen. But you also have to understand that there are unrealistic expectations, right? Putting out a game in a year and a half is not a realistic expectation. The most recent release of Cyberpunk 2077 took 10 years of development. And a lot of people think that that is not acceptable. You can't announce something 10 years ago and say it's coming out soon and get investors and everything else. And this wasn't a Kickstarter project, but there were a lot of people that were very upset over that timeline. So communication, keeping the consumer at the center, making sure that they understand the process, and really making sure that every aspect, the game designer, the communications expert, the marketing experts, the narratologists, all these different people that are part of this moving wheel of a company need to articulate what's going on. So that's the best way to mitigate those kind of issues. Yeah, it's a very complicated question, and I'm glad that you asked it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, next question. We already have a question from group 2, 12 and 14. The other groups?
And it doesn't have to be a technical question. It could be anything.
Fani, Fatin.
Hello, Professor. I'm Fani from Group 3. Can you hear my voice?
Yes, I can.
You talked about Steam last time, but as I know, their games at Steam is almost all the paid games. So we should pay to get the games. But sometimes I find out that we can crack the games. I mean the illegal version one, but still in Steam games. So how a company outfit games to prevent this crack, and talking about marketing communication, how was their advertise? I just want to ask how they advertise their product, their games product, because in reality, like people will think about, I can get the illegal one, so why should I pay for the paid one? Okay, thank you.
Right. Yeah. So this is a very complicated question and problem in all of software. This is not just exclusively to games. I know Adobe in particular. Adobe is a very highly pirated software, right? And they understand that, and they started putting out very sternly worded communications about if you are found using an illegal, or if you are found using an older version, that there would be legal repercussions, right? Now, they have to find you first, right? And it's not easy to do. Games, however, it's a little bit easier, because if the game has an online component, they can find you, right? So a lot of the illegal games, you can't go online with it. So that gets rid of some popular games that are mostly online based. So there's that issue. But there are now companies that are putting a code into these games that when you download them, one, it'll notify the company that you have it. Two, they might put an intentional bug in the system. So if you can't validate your if you can't validate your game, that your character will not be able to run. It'll actually be very, very slow. Some games have even put up, and you can Google all these different examples, and some of them are quite funny. But there's one where it'll let you play the first 10 minutes of the game. And then after that, there's a giant pop-up window where you can't see anything else. And it says, hey, I hope you're enjoying our game. I know you didn't pay for it. If you would like to download the full version, and it'll have like links on where to buy that game. So companies are doing a couple different things to mitigate that issue. Now, you can still, there's ways around everything, right? Hackers are very intelligent. They see a problem and they use the rhetoric of possibilities to solve problems constantly. Many innovations that we have are due to hackers with technology. So there's always a way around these issues. But when it comes to Kickstarter, because sometimes they will send out like the alpha testing, the beta testing, and those get released, those get leaked, and there's different issues with that. The way that these companies have been dealing with that, it has nothing to do with Kickstarter, because Kickstarter, again, is just the funding site. But when it comes to the companies themselves, if a previous version of it gets released, I mean, is it worth the money? Is it worth the legal trouble to try to track that down? Probably not. The full versions, that's something different. But because Kickstarter is all about the community, and because they're asking the community to invest in the project and develop the project, this is all just an assumption. I have no idea if this is true, but I know that there's a higher likelihood of loyalty, of brand loyalty, because of your ability to have a say in the project, to have to be able to work through these early stages of development with the creator. Many people actually communicate with the creators on Twitter. They talk to them on Discord. They talk to them through Kickstarter comments, and they feel like they are kind of part of the company. So there's that. There's also, it's not just a digital issue. There are people like Fidget Cube, for instance. Fidget Cube is one of the most popular projects on Kickstarter. And after it came out, before it even reached the backers, companies created knockoff versions of them and had them in the store for cheaper, lesser quality before they even reached the backers of the original project. Same thing that happened with the weighted blankets. That was another really popular one, that there were knockoffs before the backers even got them. And that can really hurt loyalty to the company. But it all comes down to communication. You know, if you make them part of the process, there's a higher likelihood that they will pay for that service instead of taking that service. But it also comes down to ethics of price. So remember, price is the old model, cost is the new model of IMC. And you have to take into account how expensive it is for the person to possess this product. If it's a computer game, you know, the cost of the computer, in addition to the internet, in addition to all these other things that you need to run that game. So do you really want to charge $70 for that game, or maybe you want to do 20? So it's a very complicated question. But if you're interested in how companies have tried fighting back against hackers, you can definitely Google and find some really funny examples of how companies have tried stopping that. Yeah, but thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have one question in the chat room from Edwin Falcon. Chris.
Okay, yes. So first of all, thank you for your presentation. It gives me a new perspective of the gaming industry starts. No, I'm sorry, we're not turning my camera on, asking directly. Yeah, no worries. I don't know if it's relevant or not, but proposed project turns out to be similar or even a copy of something that already exists. Who will get into copyright issues, applicant, Kickstarter, and yes. So this has actually happened a couple times already. So I focus mostly on analog games, and there are people that have tried creating parodies, kind of Nintendo. So Nintendo is the most aggressive company for games. They will go after everyone. They don't care if you're a 6-year-old sitting at home, you know, using their property to create a game on your own, like just for friends. They will go after you if they hear about it. So Nintendo has actually issued cease and desists on multiple Kickstarter projects that use Mario or Yoshi or the Mushroom Kingdom or other aspects of Nintendo properties. So that's actually kind of common. However, there have been films, movies, TV shows, analog games, video games, even products. I think there was a watch or a cooler that was actually found out to be either in copyright or it was a patent issue or there was a breach of contract or something. There are multiple cases of those that have been taken down. Some of them have been taken down by Kickstarter. Maybe somebody contacts Kickstarter, explains what happens, and then Kickstarter will take them down. Sometimes there's a cease and desist directly to the person that created the project on Kickstarter, and then they will articulate, you know, what happened. Just to give a current example, there's a game, I think it's called I Am Death. It's a card game. It's not out yet. And the artwork is it's like a chibi Grim Reaper. And it's pretty generic looking. I mean, I've seen hundreds of these kind of drawings before. And a really upset fan from a comic book contacted the creator of the comic book, who then contacted the maker of this game for a cease and desist because it was way too similar to his comic book. And they actually resolved it. The two of them resolved it, and they decided that, yes, it actually is very different. And he never heard of the comic book before that. And the project became fully funded. It actually earned more money because of the publicity from it. So these actually happen quite regularly. Anytime you have crowdfunding, there's going to be issues, and those issues may be copyright related. They might be patent related. They could just be broken promises. There was a film student, I think he was from the United States, that actually completely plagiarized the entire film. And they didn't catch it until he released the film, like years after the funding closed. But then he had to give all that money back. And, you know, so Kickstarter actually there's a whole legal section on Kickstarter that can explain these kind of issues, Edwin. But good, yeah, good question. You don't know if something is truly original or not, but you hope that Kickstarter has vetted it. And also, if it's game related, I'll tell you right now, anything game related on Kickstarter, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of gaming forums that are analyzing every single project that goes up there to make sure that their property is not stolen. So that's very common. So I see we have another question. I'm Martha from group 10. I have a question. What happened to new creators that are still new and not well known, and how do they promote or offer the project to reach the target funding and success? Yeah, so this is actually going to be the next part of my, so there's two more steps to this research project. The next step is going to be analyzing the top 100 game projects and looking at how they communicate with their community, how they design their website or their Kickstarter site, how they use updates effectively, and all of that. The step after that is going to be the social media part of it. There are social media firms now that will target Kickstarter. So they will buy the information from Facebook or other data collecting sites, and they will figure out the demographics, the buying habits of specific users, and then they will target those users with very specific ads. As somebody who has funded too many Kickstarter projects and who is on the Kickstarter site a lot for research, on all my social media platforms, I get Kickstarter project notifications, whether it's a project that's coming to Kickstarter soon. So that's something that I've talked to very local new creators on Kickstarter that have both failed and have successful Kickstarters, not in the millions by any means, but they do reach their goals. And one of the things that they start doing is they start building a fan base, an email list, a website or whatever, and then they start sending out 3 months in advance. Hey, I have a new project coming out. Or they will get a friend of theirs who is successful on Kickstarter to email their fan base and say, hey, a friend of mine has a Kickstarter coming out. Why don't you go help him out? He's a good friend of mine, or he's a great creator or whatever. You'll see that all the time on these Kickstarters where companies will advocate for other creators because it's not a competition. It's not like they're on a store shelf together, right? You don't have product A and product B on the store shelf together. They are different products, and you're going to get them at different times because you're investing in the process. Again, it's about the process, not the final. It's not purchasing the final project or product. So that's one way that they do it. The targeted social media, Instagram has this a lot. Facebook has this a lot, where there's Kickstarter sites that you'll see. It's a promoted ad. And a lot of these, they don't cost much money. one of the creators that I was talking to, I think he said that he spent $500 for a 2-month campaign, if I remember right, on Facebook or Instagram. It was one of them. And it was the first time he ever used it, and he doubled his first 24-hour funds, his backers, compared to previous projects. So, social media is very powerful. Talking to other creators, being conversational on these forums, whether it's Reddit or different Discords or different types of communication platforms, being active and say, hey, I have a project that's going to be hitting Kickstarter in a month. I would really love for you to check it out. Here's a video promoting it, or here's what the cover, the cover art looks like. Here's some concept art. I would love to hear some feedback. So start reaching out to that community before you even hit Kickstarter. It's a little bit easier with technology, with a technology-based project like a smartwatch or things like that, because they typically have investors before they even hit Kickstarter. So they have the budget for marketing. But the small creators, the really small projects that are still successful, a lot of it is word of mouth marketing. So Kickstarter talks about the snowball effect, where you just get your friends to back it, even if it's $1, because Kickstarter will promote your project based on backer number, not always by dollar amount. So if you have 50 backers, even if they only did $1 each, you're still going to be pushed up in that queue when you're looking for things on Kickstarter. If you've never been on Kickstarter's website, you can explore by magic, as they put it, and magic is based on that algorithm. Or you could do most funded, most backed, ending soon. There's a lot of different search criteria to filter through. So there's a lot of different ways, and I haven't come across books or anything that really explain Kickstarter and marketing and reaching audiences and brand loyalty. So I'm hoping that that's the direction that this project is going. But thank you for your answer, or your question.
Nadia is raising her hand.
Sure, yeah, please, Nadia.
Hello. First of all, I would like to say thank you very much for your presentation. It was really insightful, and I learned so much from it. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to ask a question. My name is Nadia from Group 7. I would like to ask a question regarding Kickstarter. So during presentation, I suddenly remember e-commerce platform like, for example, like Tokopedia and Shopee. And I've heard like a lot of people there, sometimes the people who sell their products there, they buy their own products and give their own reviews, so they can attract people to buy their products. So is it possible in Kickstarter where the creator funded their own project anonymously, so they can, so people will start to fund their projects too? Because personally, if I want to be a backer there in Kickstarter, I personally don't want to fund a project that no one have funded. So I would like to see, there are people who fund this project. So I will join them too, since there are the people that trust this and see that and believe that this project will work. So is it possible that creators do the same thing?
Of course. I mean, so Kickstarter actually has guidelines for this. I don't remember off the top of my head exactly what the guidelines are, but I do know that you cannot fund your own project. Like your account cannot put money into your own project. But that doesn't stop others, whether it's actually you or not, from doing that. However, some Kickstarters have been shut down for manipulative backing. There was one in particular, they weren't bots. I think they were real accounts, but they essentially paid those people to fund it. And it it got leaked that that was happening, and it wasn't enough to fund the project. It was just maybe 100 people to get the first 100 backers or whatever. And it was a gray area for Kickstarter. And I know that they've changed their guidelines since. And I don't remember what they are off the top of my head. However, they encourage you to get family and friends to fund. They truly believe the snowball effect, that if you even get 5 backers, that will promote more people from to get into, or to fund it. Because I have seen many projects where I'm like, oh, that sounds really interesting, but there are no backers. And I instantly think, like, is it not reputable? Do people have issues with this creator? Is it a fake account? Because sometimes there are fake projects, like repeat projects that appear. So there's a lot of issues with that. However, as somebody who has funded projects that had less than 100 backers, so say they're only looking for $1,000. So you don't need a whole lot of backers for that, right? If there is absolutely no communication, no updates, no FAQs, nothing about risk management, nothing about their personal story and why they're passionate about this project, those are all red flags for the consumer, right? So I think that, you hear all the time, like, celebrities, will write a book, or they'll have somebody write a book for them, and then they have a company buy 100,000 copies of it, so it raises higher on the sellers lists, right? It's more difficult to do that on Kickstarter, because it really is about how many backers there are, because you're not selling units, right? It's how many people and how much money those people are giving. So if you really want to raise on those lists, if you want to be, I forget what they call it, something riser. But if you want to be promoted on the Kickstarter site, and on other sites as well, if you want to rate, get high on there, you need a lot of backers, and you need a lot of backers in a short amount of time. So some people, I'm sure that it's still a practice where they will get their families and friends and everybody else to do it. And then once they have enough backers, those people can cancel their pledge at any time. So that's another thing. Until your money is collected at the end of the pledge, you can pull out of Kickstarter whenever you want. So that's another thing where people will get all their friends and family to sign on and back it, and then they'll pull out once they've tripled the backers or something like that. So of course those practices happen. Is it unethical? I think it depends. It's a really weird gray area, because you are funding the process, and whether you had 1,000 backers or 1, does it matter? I'm not sure. Is that lying to the consumer? Well, if you say, wow, we have 1,000 backers, that's 1,000 people that love my project, and you're advocating that, knowing that 999 of them are friends, family, former students, et cetera, that's unethical. But if it's, funding a project is funding a project in Kickstarter's eyes in a lot of ways. Not in all ways, but in a lot of ways. So I'm sure there's plenty of shady practices out there that are gray areas or unethical that still happen. But I do believe that Kickstarter does a good job of monitoring those. Yeah, and some have been taken down because of that issue.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
We have another question in chat room.
Yes. So we're coming from group 9. First of all, I'm sorry for not asking the question. No worries at all. First note Kickstarter from one of my favorite games called Undertale. What I want to ask is, does giving reward for pledging extra money as a backer the only way to make someone want to donate more money, or are there other ways? That's a really good question. So digital games, so I'll start with digital games and then I'll go into analog games, because I think that they're similar, but also different in a lot of ways. So when it comes to digital games, we see this all the time with pre-order bonuses, right? So you want the new Call of Duty, you want the new Final Fantasy, you want the new whatever, right? If you pre-order it and you give them an extra $10, you get new characters, you get new weapons, you get new recipes, you get new cars or whatever in the game, right? They're digital rewards. Sometimes there's physical rewards. Maybe it'll be a metal case instead of a plastic case. Maybe you'll get a figurine or whatever, right? So digital games will do that to get you to pledge more money. So that's one way that we see that happening outside of Kickstarter. In Kickstarter, pledging more money could be getting beta access to the game or alpha access. It could be having your name in the credits. What else? It could be different tiers. Like if you donate so much money, your gold tier. So your avatar is going to have a gold line around it, a border, and there's other aspects of that. What else have I seen? But there's a lot of different things for that. Some people, they will just pledge extra money because they really think it's a good project. And we see this happening all the time with especially smaller projects. You'll see a much bigger company or a much bigger or a successful funder, and they will donate or they will invest in somebody's project. One, they might be a competitor and they want to see what their project is doing. Two, they might be something that they're just interested in, right? Just because you work for a game company making Call of Duty doesn't mean that you're not going to also purchase and play Battlefield, even though they are similar games, they're competitors and everything else. So we see that happening a lot where somebody will be like, you know what, I think this is a good project. I don't care about the reward. I'm going to give you $1,000, even though you're only asking for 25. So that does happen. Also in backer kit, when you're finalizing everything months after the project closes, there's always a tip jar. So if you think that the company did a really good job, if they communicated really well, for whatever reason, you want to give them more money for no reward, you always have that option. And surprisingly, people utilize that quite often. So there is that. I mean, I think open communication is often rewarded with more money, at least in my experience. Now, analog games are a little bit different because most of the time you don't get digital rewards in the same way. However, if you donate more money, you may get extra artwork as a digital file that you can use. You might get a soundtrack. I think Undertale is one of the ones that did that. If you pay so much money, you get a soundtrack. You get the soundtrack as well. You can get, if you pay a certain amount, maybe instead of getting plastic minis, you get metal minis. So there's upgrades to the project that you can get for pledging more money. There's all different kinds of ways to get more money, but I said it before and I'll say it again, communication is rewarded. I truly believe that with better communication, and I've seen this over so many different projects where people communicate so well and they're like, oh, you know, everybody, I'm so sorry. Because of the global pandemic, everybody's orders are being delayed. And this happened across the board for everything. Supply chains were drastically altered because of the pandemic, with many factories being in China completely shut down for months at a time. So, so that happened. There was one company that we didn't hear anything for 4 months. And they're like, oh, sorry, there's been delays, but no explanation. And people started canceling their pledges because you can ask for refunds afterwards if you don't do the backer kit survey. Then there were other companies that almost every week, hey, I've been on the phones for 3 hours now trying to get a hold of somebody to figure out new information that I can tell everybody. And those people end up getting more money. Or there are people that will be asking like, hey, do you have a late pledge option? And this is something that's somewhat, maybe in the last 5 years, a new option where after the project closes, you can do a late pledge. So if you heard about this months later and you still want to get in on the Kickstarter exclusives and everything else, you can actually pay money to do that. So I think that's a long way of answering this question of, you know, does it happen? Can you give extra money without reward? Absolutely. Does extra rewards mean extra money? Not always. There are some projects that they will, for instance, there was one project, if you donate if your pledge is $5,000, they will fly you out to the studio to see behind the scenes how they do everything. And they'll only offer like so many of them. And maybe one person will get it, or maybe nobody will get it. So just because you have these reward tiers doesn't mean that everybody's going to take part in them. But again, communication. If the creator seems like a really nice person and they're very open to the community, they're always answering questions timely and everything else, maybe you do want to expand your pledge so you can Zoom chat with them or go to the factory or something like that. Video game companies do this all the time, where you can actually chat with the animators and stuff. I hope I answered your question. It's there's a lot to that.
Okay, one more question from Josephine.
Okay, hi, Mr. Stuart. Good morning to you. My name is Josephine. I'm so sorry for that I am in no condition to open my camera, but I'm curious about, so can the Kickstarter support other businesses, or is it specialized to support the businesses in creative industry only? And I don't quite catch on how they help developing these games, or how do they improve the quality of the businesses other than funding them. And lastly, it's kind of related to Edwin's question. So how do the Kickstarters maintain their value or their quality over time, when they fund lots of with lots of business, lots of projects with different backgrounds? That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This is a big question. So let me let me start with your first question about all the different kinds of industries and stuff that they currently fund and maintain quality and all that. So if you go to Kickstarter and you click on Explore, so if you just go to the regular Kickstarter site, they'll have their featured projects. They'll have their recommended for you based on your previous viewing history. Even though I'm in an incognito banner, incognito internet browser right now, based on the things that I've just recently clicked on, it does start putting down recommendations. You'll see the categories here at the top, but I'm going to click on Explore, right? And there's many other things that I can look at here from different categories. Things that are near me geographically. So if I want to fund people that are local, if I want to explore things that are nearing the end, the home stretch, things that are just starting, etc. So I'm going to click on Explore, and I'm going to click on Everything. So this is based on you can see here, sorted by magic. So this is just, there's a lot of variables that go into this. Funding goals, percentage of funding, dollar amounts, how many backers there are. There's just so many different aspects here that go into magic. But I can sort by other things as well. But I'm going to click on all categories. Now, these are the 13 primary categories here. So there's art, and all different kinds of art installations, or maybe it's a personal, it's a person that's just trying to create a portfolio There's a lot of things there. Comics, self-explanatory. Crafts, there's all different kinds of things in crafts. And if I were to click on these, I can see the subcategories. So under crafts, there's candles, crochet, DIY, embroidery, etc. There's dance, so all different kinds of performance arts are in here. Design, I don't fully understand design, because a game system could be under design, a smartwatch could be under design, but it's not under technology. So part of this is under design, you have product design. So that's just, you have the prototype, you have a concept of a design that you're trying to get funded, so then you could bring it to a firm to actually manufacture it and figure out how it actually works. So smartwatches fall under this typically. And then there's fashion, film and video. Food is very interesting. A lot of times the food will be for restaurants or farmers, or there's a lot of different aspects for books and tutorials and other things there. Games, pretty self-explanatory, but tabletop games is the biggest category here. But they also have mobile games and stuff. Journalism, actually, there are some Pulitzer winners. There's many different award winners that are under journalism. So it's not just a product. Maybe you're trying to sponsor a podcast, some type of journalistic adventure or endeavor. There's a lot of different aspects of journalism here. Music, self-explanatory. Photography, publishing. Publishing covers all different types of publishing. The one that I think is depressing is academic publishing. Some of the Kickstarters for that. People that can't get grants or that don't know how to fit things into what they do academically. There's some projects under there. Technology and theater. So there are so many different things that you can get funded here. And then if you go under statistics, you can see which ones get more funding than others. Film, video, music, and games are the top 3 categories for funding. So those are the different kinds that are on Kickstarter that you can fund. Now, the question about integrity and maintaining essentially Kickstarter maintaining the product quality. So like I said before, they have taken projects down. They have communicated to creators that are not giving enough updates. They have, I've seen projects that they're only there for a day or 2 before they get shut down, but where it's essentially like a small paragraph saying, this is who I am and this is what I want to do, but there's nothing at all that would communicate that they've even thought past like the brainstorming phase. There's nothing that's really there. Even if it had 300 backers, Kickstarter would contact them and say, hey, look, you don't have these 5 things that we want to see on Kickstarters. And I know that they did change things somewhat recently. So now you need to have certain minimums before you can actually launch the Kickstarter. And when you hit launch, it goes to Kickstarter for evaluation, whether that's it's an algorithm or it's an actual person that looks at it. I'm not sure, before it goes to the public. So there's a lot of different aspects here that they analyze to make sure that you are not getting scammed, essentially, out of your money. You did have another part of that question about other sites, but I don't remember the question entirely.
Yeah, so I want to ask about, it's not about sites actually. So how do they help developing these games, and how do they improve the quality of the businesses other than funding them? Thank you.
Right. I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. So Kickstarter actually does not do much at all when it comes to developing a business, business plans, integrity, or anything like that. It is strictly a funding site. So when you put your project out there, you are using their web design mechanics, you are using their community, and you are using the financial institutions that they have to receive funds from people. So that's what you're getting from Kickstarter. You're not getting business advice. You're not getting, they don't have quality standards to improve your business. They have partners that can help with all of this, but Kickstarter itself doesn't do that. And so part of its mission statement, let me just pull that up real quick. They kind of address that a little bit. So they have a charter that goes into some of this, but they say that their mission is to help to bring creative projects to life. They believe in the art and the creative expression. They don't want the world elites to dictate what a company should be and what creative people should do. So it's very open, very free. And they say that we are committed to our mission. We wrote in our business model, 2015, we became a public benefit corporation, a for-profit company that prioritizes positive outcomes for society as much as our shareholders. We update our corporate charter to lay out specific goals and commitments to put our values into operations, promote arts and culture, fight inequality, help creative projects happen, etc. And if you go to their actual business charter, it's more legal, but it lays out that they're not a lobbying group. They're not, they don't campaign for specific policies. If you're interested in this part of Kickstarter and how it actually operates, scroll all the way to the bottom of their site, click on About Us, and go to their charter. Their charter does explain exactly what you're asking. Now, it does have standards, right? And part of IMC is to make sure that your values and what you hold dear as a company, as a CEO or a communications specialist, et cetera, is communicated and aligns with your community. And because this is an organization that has to rely on its community for multiple aspects of success, it does draw certain lines. There was a pro-life documentary that was being produced, and it was very inflammatory and very divisive. And Kickstarter made the hard decision to take it down and to stop the project. And it got it created a controversy because they were taking a stand on a policy. They also took down, there was a documentary that was being made, I think, about disabilities, but it was done in a very provocative way, and they put their foot down on that too. A lot of these are actually outlined on the Wikipedia, and other forums have listed out all the controversial projects and what aligns and what does not align with Kickstarter. What did they keep? What did they get rid of? And it's complicated. It's very complicated because they don't want to take a stand, and they do believe in free creativity. But at the same time, they need to make sure that they are putting out a positive impact on society. And if something comes across as not positive, and that could be in many different ways, and articulated in many different ways, then they do put their foot down, and they make a choice. I hope I answered your question. It was a multi-part question, and I hope I answered each one.
Yes, you did. Thank you. It was comprehensive.
Good. Thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you, Chris. It was really great lecture this evening. But the time is up. It's already 9 p.m. in here. So thank you for the topic for the lecture. It's a new thing for us about game Kickstarter. And we hope to see you again in 2021, maybe in Indonesia, if everything gets better, maybe.
That would be amazing. I hope we are in the position to be able to do that in 2021.
We hope so. Okay.
I did just type my email into the chat, so if anybody wants to ask a follow-up question or anything like that, I'm available over email, and I'd be more than happy to continue this conversation.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, student.
Right.
And
thank you so much for having me. Take care, everyone.
Okay. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Good morning, Chris.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
You too.